Emma, welcome. How are you doing today?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Good, thanks. Really good, really good. You were saying just before we started recording that you have snow where you are, although it hasn't settled.
Yes. Yeah. No,
It
it
still
hasn't,
counts.
unfortunately. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Alon, my partner, we're like up against the window, like, it's snowing. Like, so happy about it.
Yeah, it's beautiful, beautiful when it snows. Well, thank you so much for being
Yeah.
here. I came across your profile, I think on either LinkedIn or the London Meetup site, and I thought you'd be a really interesting person to speak with. What I'd like to do is go through your background in SEO, delve into
Mm.
technical implementation issues that I'm sure you've come across, especially having been client side. Um,
Uh,
get into your take on the consultancy and client side dynamic. Of course, we've got to get into AI, especially ChatGPT, and
oh
we'll
God.
finish off. We'll finish off on your take on SEO community, and then what you're looking forward to with the year ahead. So, with all
Cool.
of that
Yeah.
said, as I like to do with all my guests, I like to ask my SEO guests how they got started within SEO. So, with that said, how did you become an SEO professional?
How did I become an SEO? Oh, you know what? You hear this answer all of the time, and I'm really sorry that I can't say something original, but I kind of fell into it. I was doing an art history degree. I did a BA and MA, and then as I was doing the masters, I started doing internships and work experience and things like that. And I started at a heritage consultancy, which was called Culture Syndicates. Small shout out for them. And it was like a marketing internship at a heritage consultancy. So that wasn't the first interaction with it, but it did kind of start me on the road to being properly interested in it. And after
Mm,
that, I had another internship, which was part of the Nottingham University internship scheme, which is a really good scheme that they do. And it was with Distinction, which is a digital agency in Nottingham. And that was ace, and they offered me my first job after that. So did kind of fall into it just from being interested in something else and then working at a heritage consultancy in a marketing capacity and then thinking actually yeah I really like this and pursuing that. And in the agency I was doing PPC content writing, like they just introduced you to everything and really threw you in the deep end, which I really appreciated. But yeah, SEO kind of stuck at that point. That was the one for me. And after that I ended up in house at House of Fraser, and that was in the specialist SEO capacity. And yeah, sold after that point.
mm. Why SEO
Yeah.
out of all the channels that stock? Why do you think SEO is the one that stock?
I don't, yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I don't know why SEO. I loved it the most. I don't know if I can really tell you why. I guess it was a digital agency, so straight from the off, it wasn't just content focused or backlinks. It was very technical because you're working on web builds of different types and being asked questions like, "Hey, how's SEO for an SPA site?" and being like, like I'm gonna have to find that out. Like
Yeah.
you really were thrown in the deep end, which is a good thing. It's how I like to learn.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, just being exposed to quite a lot. I found it challenging. I did like PPC, and I still like it, but I really liked SEO. I really like the technical
SEO.
side. I find it like detective work some of the time. I really enjoy it.
Yeah, I think you picked a good one. If I do say so myself,
Thank you. I'm glad you
it's
agree.
yeah, slightly biased, but I think it's the best channel
Yeah, I was
in my
gonna
opinion.
say.
Would you say so? Would you
Yeah, we
say you're
picked
more
well.
of a yeah? Would you say you're more of a technical person on page, analytical off page, or more for an all rounder?
I wouldn't say I'm an all rounder. Like I've never professionally done backlinks. There's either it's either not been a service at the company that I've worked for, or somebody else in the company has done it. And I have worked on a lot of technical projects. So I would probably say that my expertise does lean towards the technical. But like I love a good content strategy, and I wouldn't say that I wouldn't say that because I focus on technical, I'm less good at content strategies. Like, I just really like the technical,
Hmm.
and that's been what I'm exposed to most. So I think other people have labeled me a lot as a technical SEO, but I would kind of lean more towards all rounder, because it's not like I don't do content strategies, and I really enjoy a content strategy. So
Mm.
yeah, not quite an all rounder, more like content strategies, overall SEO strategy and tech.
Mm. I think probably most recently people regard SEO more as a technical channel, whereas earlier on, let's say 10 years ago, 10 plus years ago, people saw SEO as link building. pre
Yeah.
pre
Yeah.
Penguin, SEO was synonymous with link building. Nowadays, people tend to view SEO as a technical channel, which is fine. It is the core of SEO, and I find that it's the most challenging when it comes to implementing things. I think us SEOs, we have a really good relationship with copywriters. We're very close with writers, but with developers, we're less so. And I think we haven't quite gotten the way to effectively communicate with developers as we have with copywriters, from my experience, both personally and also with colleagues I've worked with. I find that SEOs
Yeah.
in-house, SEOs client side, they always find it challenging to have recommendations implemented. Now, having worked client side, what are some of the challenges you've seen when it comes to having a strategy or recommendation and aiming to get it through the line and actually have it implemented?
I think that's a great question. I kind of want to unpack a little bit why it's the case that
Go for it.
that view is generally held, and I would say that it's generally true as well. Like, it's definitely been my experience, and you do hear it all of the time. Like, your relationship with a content writer, or merchandising team, buying team, etc., it can typically be a little bit better than with a development team. Um, I think I think the reputation of SEO as a technical field. I mean, I remember a few years ago, I think it was at a conference. I think John, is it Mueller? Mueller, I always say his name
Hmm.
wrong, because it's John Moo on Twitter, and I always just say John Moo, and then I'm like, oh wait, that's
Yeah.
not his name. So I feel bad about it. But he said something like the SEO industry has come on leaps and bounds, especially in the area of tech. And I think this was the same year that you saw a lot of literature coming out on JavaScript SEO, how to deal with sites that are predominantly JavaScript, or loading a lot of
Hmm.
client-side JavaScript. And I do agree. Like, I do think that the technical side of SEO has come on a lot, and I think that because it's easier to have a definite answer to something, like, yeah, if you block Google in your robots text file, it's highly unlikely you're going to rank your site. Like, that's a yes or no thing. And so I think that it is much more accepted, whereas there is more guesswork in some of the other fields. So I wonder if that has something to do with leaning in more into tech and seeing it as a more technical field, because it has come along so far, and because the answers are usually definite. Although there are, of course, a lot of situations where, well, it depends.
Mm.
But a canonical DAG does something, and you know what it's going to do. Um, but yeah, I wonder if the reputation of SEO as being a more technical field, and when you're giving technical advice to a content writer, if they're more willing to trust that advice because they aren't necessarily technical. Whereas a
Mm.
developer who is as techie as you can get, And then you have this SEO saying, oh, can we do this? And then you have the reputation of SEOs going back a few decades, and where it's all like link building and a little bit scammy. I wonder if that reputation is kind of holding us back, and the fact that we're not perhaps as technical as them, but we're asking them to do something. And so I wonder if that has something to do with it. But I mean, there are obviously like absolute stars of developers who really get it. Like Miles, who I'm working with now at Oxford Comma, like just the difference in talking to him versus some other developers. Like you'll ask him a question and he'll be like, "Oh yeah, it's this," and I'm like, "Oh my god, what a great interaction!" Like I've really valued working with him. I worked with him in house, and honestly, I would say that was one of the best roles that I had, because like I sat next to him and he would ask me questions on how to implement something properly, and I'd never had that before. And then I could ask him anything, and it was a really good relationship. And I'm so glad that I get to work with him again, because it's just like the best work relationship between an SEO and a developer I could ever imagine. But yeah, I definitely have had the experience of being ignored or not getting items into your tech roadmap, for example. Advice on that, I think try to get on side, like ask questions. Like I saw the episode that you put out with, I think it was Patrick, is it Patrick Stocks,
Yeah.
or Patrick Stock. I really enjoyed that episode. I thought it was great. And he was saying, like, when he gives a ticket that's about SEO and it has a technical solution, he will say, this is the outcome I want, but you do it however you want. And I did kind of like that approach, because I think a lot of the time, if you do say, and I want it to be exactly this, you're kind of discounting the knowledge and the expertise that a developer has built over however long their career has been, in preference of exactly how you want it to be done, when it's more than likely that you're not coding it actually yourself. I do think that it's definitely good to have a detailed ticket, and there are obviously some misunderstandings, but trying to build that relationship based on respect as a foundation, I think, is a pretty solid way to start. Sometimes it won't help at all. Like you'll just have a roadmap, they've got it in place, you can't get anything in there, and it's 2 years long and you're just waiting. But I think in that case, like maybe try to sneak a few things in, try to support, just try your best. And if all else fails, try to focus on content, because it's more likely that you'll get something up. There are fewer roadblocks there.
Yeah, I find there are almost like two schools of thought when it comes to implementing technical SEO recommendations from the SEO ourselves. One is you have to be very prescriptive and say exactly what you want and what you want the developer to do. The other approach is to show the problem and to work with the developer to find the best solution, with the assumption that they will have the answer rather than you. And what I'm finding is that we're, as an industry, those two approaches, I think the former tends to be the approach a lot of agencies use, especially those agencies that consider themselves to be technical SEO agencies. Because I'm finding that agencies will hire a tech SEO person who ideally has a developer background or knows a lot about development or is interested in development, because all they do is service technical SEO related stuff, right? They don't venture into content, which I think is a mistake, but that's another topic. So they focus more on technical elements of web development. Essentially, they're borderline web developers, and so their recommendations are very prescriptive, down to the wire, down to the letter, or whatever the phrase is. And I find a lot of developers do not like that approach. The developers I've certainly worked with do not like that approach, because it's essentially telling them exactly what needs to be done, and in a sense undermining their work. And it's funny you mention an episode I had with Patrick. I have another one coming up soon with a developer. So I have a working with uh, um, I have talks with SEOs and working with SEOs where I speak with non-SEOs about SEO. And I want to get this developer's take on it because I have a suspicion that they would prefer to work with SEOs in a cohesive manner, but it's the way we present ourselves. We do it in a very undermining aspect. And I think we had a similar situation with copywriters very early on. We didn't have this good relationship as we have now. Very early on, we had pushbacks. I mean, we tell a copywriter, you need to include these keywords within your copy and say where it needs to be. And they would push back saying, what you're recommending doesn't make sense. It's not grammatically correct. And we had this battle and we're all now fine with them. I find the same sort of pushback we have or the same sort of dynamics we had with copywriters, we're having with developers. Do you find that it's better to be prescriptive or to be more collaborative with developers?
I think
Or
a
does
lot
it
of the
depend?
time you're limited to, yeah, I'm going to give the classic answer of it depends. I think it depends on what you are almost given access to. Like, I think anybody who is writing a technical ticket would rather do that collaboratively. I mean, what two minds are better than one, right? I
Mhm.
love working with Miles because we get to work together. But being agency side and having been in-house as well, there is a difference in the level of access that you get to do that.
Yeah.
Because I think that there's a lot of pressure on agencies to have the answer. And not need a developer to be able to work with them. But I do
Mhm.
think it's the better way to go if you can. But also, some clients don't want you to talk directly to developers or directly to other third parties, for example, which
Mm.
can limit collaboration. But I do understand why they do it if they're being a bit precious of the time that they're using in their retainer. Um, so if you're in house, it is a little bit different because you can just email them and be like, "Hey, what's up? You want to talk about this
Yeah.
ticket? Like,
Yeah.
I need to do something. What do you think?" Like, it's a lot easier. You're much more free to be able to do that. And who doesn't like being asked what they think? I think
Exactly.
that's
Yeah.
always nice, right?
Yeah.
Uh, um, I saw years ago, I think, or maybe like a couple of years ago, maybe even three, Jamie Indigo was doing some, I think, consulting. She'd just started consulting. I don't know if she's consulting anymore, but this is when she was consulting. And she she linked to, I don't think it was the full slide deck, but she linked to a few slides that she had put together in an audit. And one of the slides said, all of this is created in accepting that you are doing the best job that you can. And none of this comes from the viewpoint that you are not doing your job properly. Like, different people in different capacities have different things that they need to be aware of, different things that they need to do, and that's totally fine. I'm just adding something else to the mix now.
Mm.
So I think that was a really nice approach. I think, I think just thinking of people as other humans with thoughts and feelings is a
Yeah.
pretty good way to go.
Yeah.
As far as you can. I think you can end up in a relationship with a developer that can be quite poor if you have started out saying, "Hey, can we do this? This is the outcome that I want." But obviously, achieve that any way that you can. And
Mm.
then the outcome isn't what you've actually asked for. And then you have a lot of back and forth. And I think that can lead to obviously not the best relationship. And I think that a lot of the time that poor relationship is placed on the SEO. I don't really know why
Yeah.
that's the case. I guess it's because we're creating the tickets, but it really does go both ways. If something isn't being tested properly, if there isn't a proper QA process set up, and something is done, put live without SEO input as well, then it's done incorrectly according to the SEO, and then you have to go back to it. So there are other processes involved, other people involved in the process that can make it a bit more difficult. Like, I don't think it's always the SEO. I think we're always thinking, well, how can we make this better? How can we make it better? But sometimes you can't. Sometimes it's just how it is, and you've got to deal with the situation that you're in any way that you want to deal with it.
Yeah. You mentioned client side, agency side. I'm curious, which do you prefer, or which did you prefer before you were a consultant?
I don't prefer either. I grew up like living outside of a hamlet, so like in the middle of nowhere. Like Alon made a joke the other day that it was just my family and livestock, and it, like, he was exaggerating, but that is how it was. And then I went to Nottingham, so a city, for university, and then moved to London. And people always ask, like, "Oh, are you a city girl or a country girl?" And it's like, well, neither. I'm pretty happy anywhere, and like I'm pretty happy client side, pretty happy agency side. I think I'm just generally pretty content as a person. But I know that people prefer one or the other, and I think there are obviously very bad experiences that people have spoken about being agency side, but I think that there are a lot of agencies now who are cleaning up their act, so to speak. I think that SEO agencies have done a lot of cleaning up in the last few years, especially to make it a good experience for SEOs. I've heard some real horror stories. So, going back in the day, I can totally understand why somebody would choose in-house over agency if the agency that they're in is not great. Who wouldn't make that decision? I've been very lucky in the agencies that I've worked at and am now building. Very lucky indeed. I've never had a terrible experience. There are things that obviously I would improve. As somebody who's always wanted to run a business, you go into other businesses and you're like, oh, maybe I'd do that a little differently. But no, I've always been pretty happy either side. But I genuinely think it depends on where you end up. There are horror stories in the house too, but I have seen a trend of agencies coming out now where they've perhaps worked in another agency and they absolutely hated it and they weren't treated respectfully for this reason or that reason. And now they're doing it differently. And I love that. I champion that. I think that's great.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
needed.
Definitely, because it has evolved. I think earlier on, SEO at agency was very much just used as a product no one cared or even understood. So it was very salesy. But now we have people who are SEO specialists who are either leading the sales within an agency or starting up their own agency as you have done. So how do you find consultancy now, being an independent person?
How do I find it? Great. I like it. I don't really know how to answer that. Like it's
How would
obviously
you
a scary
say?
choice to do it, but I
Yeah.
love it. It's led to a lot of I kind of burnt out a bit in my last role, and I couldn't take on anymore. I couldn't invest my time in learning because the learning of it I wasn't inspired because I was so burnt out. And now I've got a better work-life balance, and I'm suddenly finding that actually, I really love learning and I want to contribute, which is really different. A few years ago, I did Brighton SEO. I did apparently London SEO, but I don't remember doing that. Like, you weren't the only person who's mentioned London SEO to me this week, and I'm like, did I did I talk there? Like, I don't remember it at all. I did Reading SEO. I don't know if I've done London SEO. Anyway, I yeah, I love it. To sum up, yeah, it's great. I think controlling your time and investing your time and kind of giving back to the community, I think that's ace. I really enjoy it, and I'm sad that in the past few years I haven't done it just because I've been so kind of stuck in being in a burnout state.
Mm, mm. When it comes to implementing SEO recommendations, what would you say a business leader should bear in mind when they reach out to a consultant or an agency?
That's a good question. I mean, oof, tricky. I mean, I guess you've got to ask a few questions like reputation. There are still definitely some very scammy agencies out there, and you don't want to be stuck with one of those. I think asking a few basic questions on their approach to link building will probably root that out.
Yeah.
Or like their approach to account management, like how many clients an account manager will be working with, because you do hear horror stories with like managing 50 clients and like, how how
Yeah.
like
Yeah, exactly.
remarkable, like if you've managed to do that, like props, man, like how. I think asking a few questions to root out like what like a actually good SEO agency would be my first step. But I guess just also having a conversation with them, because you're going to have to work with them for probably at least a year, like preferably it's a long-term relationship, right?
Hmm.
So you've kind of got to like them as well. But I think some of the common issues that you do have with larger agencies is that you'll get on a call with a salesperson who has been in the SEO industry for quite some time, maybe has been a head of SEO and now they're also working in a sales function, for example. And you'll get on the call with them, but then you won't necessarily be working with them. You'll end up working with somebody who's much more junior. And I think
Hmm.
that can end up being a problem. Like they can end up inheriting huge technical projects, like really complex indexing strategies that you're having to fix if it hasn't gone well, or recommend. And especially if it's a very large website where tech SEO can't, I guess, what's that graph where it's like this size of site and then how much tech is involved in it. It goes like this. So like the larger the site, the more you're going to have to focus on tech SEO.
Yeah.
I think if you put a junior on something where a complex indexing strategy or maybe programmatic SEO is getting involved, I think it's almost cruel to make them go
Yeah.
solo on that.
Hmm.
And always make sure that there is support. Like, who is the team? Like, if they're doing the day-to-day work, who are they supported by? Is it by people who've been in the industry for a while?
Hmm.
If yes, then how much time do they have on it, or are they always working on business development? I think that is a trap that large agencies can fall into, in that you end up providing a service that is perhaps a little bit subpar, but you're riding on your reputation and your salespeople. I don't want to fall
Hmm.
into that trap, so I would look out for that. But ultimately, it's finding out if they can do the job. If you've got quite a small site, and it's mainly content writing, it's complex tech issues aren't going to come up probably. So
Hmm.
it's just finding out if they have the skills and expertise to actually do the job. Looking at case studies and just talking to them a bit. That was pretty
Yeah, I
long-winded.
find that no, that's brilliant advice. I find that a lot of businesses now are more familiar with SEO, so they are aware of certain questions to ask, especially when it comes to the client, consultant slash agency dynamics. Um, let's say a CMO who's invested in SEO. Um, in my experience, most CMOs tend to have this mindset that they will invest in SEO and then that's all that's needed for it. They don't consider the management of SEO, the day to day,
Mm,
weekly, monthly, quarterly, etc. And that usually leads into issues such as implementation, not recommendations rather, not actually being implemented until there is a
Yes.
big problem. Problem being an algorithm update or a competitor who's done something which Google now favors over them, or something internally. They've, I don't know, de-indexed the site or something. And then SEO all of a sudden comes into focus. What would you say businesses need to do to ideally prevent an issue from occurring in the first place after they've invested in it, in SEO?
That's a good question.
Because
And totally agree, by the
the
way. You can definitely, oh, sorry, after you.
no, no, no. I was just going to add
Oh,
to that. The background to this is is with the whole approach to optimization. It almost looks at it from a reactive point of view, right? So something happens on a website, either by the client, Google, or a competitor. It's usually one of the three, right? Or perhaps all three. Um, and then SEO does something afterwards. So it's very reactive. But there is a
mm,
case to take a more preventative approach. And I think that lies in not the investment of in SEO, because I think brands get that they need to invest in SEO, but they struggle with the management of SEO. So I think that's where the problem lies. That's why I thought of that question, and it's like, what can they do to actually prevent issues from occurring in the first place?
mm, yeah, I agree. I sometimes also what you'll find is that they have invested in an audit or something like that, and then they realize that, oh, somebody actually has to do the recommendations, like somebody actually has to implement
Hmm.
it. Um,
Yeah.
and then like if their traffic doesn't improve, this is just a classic tale of woe for agency side SEO, where they've given recommendations, traffic isn't improving, and you've nagged, bugged, tried your darndest
Hmm.
to actually get it implemented, and nobody's done anything. You've offered to do it, and they say no, and then they come to you when traffic's on the down, and you're like,
Yeah.
well, like that, yeah, like somebody needs to do it.
Hmm.
Yeah, as I said, absolutely classic tale of woe. Um, So yeah, you can definitely get into that situation. I think in some situations you just need a reset, like even to the extent of like a fresh voice on the account, ringing somebody senior, like a senior
Hmm.
stakeholder, like, hey, somebody needs to actually implement it. Like I have seen an agency, I can't remember which one it was, but they put out a tweet saying, yeah, we just stopped working with the company because nobody had any time to implement it. So we were kind of wasting our time. They were wasting our time, and they can always come back. But when somebody their side has time to actually do it, then work together. But until then, we're not just going to take their money for no reason. I thought that
Wow.
was some pretty
Admirable.
sweet in
Yeah.
integrity there. I thought that was good. Yeah, yeah. Because I mean, for a lot of agencies, that's like the dream. Like you don't have to do anything and you're getting a
Yeah.
retainer. I don't
Yeah.
think it. I personally don't think it is, because I'd feel really bad about it. But there are a lot of agencies out there who'd be like, great, okay, yeah, we'll take your money. Um, yeah. What was the question? Sorry, I feel like I haven't answered it yet.
No, it was just getting your take on what businesses can do from a more preventative measure. I Something I've
Gotcha.
seen a number of brands start to do is have almost like an SEO first approach. So they look at their digital. This
Yeah.
lends into what Eli Swartz, I think is how you pronounce his surname, talks about, as in SEO being a product. So product-led SEO, where brands look at
Hmm.
SEO and say it's a digital first channel. So everything has SEO incorporated from briefing stage, not at the end stage, just before, let's say, a site launch or something. SEO is right from the beginning, and I think that is something I'm seeing. I can imagine a lot of clients will start to incorporate something like that into their approach.
Yes, I think that would be great. It's definitely the best way to go. Being as integrated as possible into things like sprint releases, things like that. I mean, I've definitely
Hmm.
worked with clients before where you ask to be integrated as much as possible, and say, you're available to test. Like if there's a big sprint going out, like let me know, even in smaller ones, like even if it's quick fixes, just tell me what's in there and I can say, oh, as an SEO, I can weigh in on that or not. And like I have had sites just be completely de-indexed, and then you're like, hey, I noticed that the site is de-indexed.
You guys kind of
So
need it
definitely
live, right?
notice that. And
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I heard you wanted it live and indexed. Yeah, definitely had that problem. It's not ideal, but yeah, no, I think being as integrated as possible, being a part of release processes and things like that. And if you're not willing to have an agency be part of that, then look to hire somebody in house or change the remit of somebody else's role to allow for that. But I agree into integration as much as possible. I actually
Yeah.
saw somebody post in a Slack group saying they're so used to companies asking them to get involved in a migration right at the end. She's just been asked to quote for a migration from the beginning, and she doesn't know what to quote anymore. So she was
Wow.
asking for advice on how to quote for it. She just hasn't done it in so long. I thought that was very funny. But yeah, get SEOs involved. We want to have an input, and there's a lot of input to be had. So yeah, get
Yeah.
us involved.
Get SEOs involved from briefing stage rather than towards the end or at
Yes.
the very end. It will save a lot of
Yes, absolutely.
issues from occurring.
Yeah, a lot of woe.
Yeah, absolutely. Now let's go and get into AI. It seems AI generated content seems inevitable at this point. What's your take on GPT and how non-SEOs are potentially aiming to use it for SEO purposes, such as, let's say, title tags, writing title tags?
Oh, yeah, yeah, AI. What to do with UA? I mean, it's so useful, and I found myself being unbelievably polite. Like it like, hello, could you possibly, like, oh, thank you so much. Um, so, I mean, it is super useful. I have very much used it before. Actually, I knit this jumper. I love knitting, and I asked it to create a knitting pattern for me, just like a simple raglan construction. And I was reading it, and I was like, I don't think that makes any sense. And there's somebody on TikTok who's a crocheter, so quite similar to knitting. And they've been making the patterns that they've asked ChatGPT for. And she called one of the videos, "Today I make a cursed Pikachu." And it just looks terrible. So I think that's kind of an example where it isn't quite there. But I mean, I've used it before. I think uh, for me, I find it most useful as kind of a starting point. Like, hey, I want to write a message about starting my agency, for example. How do I do an announcement post? And my I'm not very good at like writing, because I have an academic background. I just write very factually. And I've tried for years to get out of it, but like writing that I'm proud in a post doesn't come naturally. What my first draft was, hey, I've started an agency. So I was like, hey, chat GPT, and like it came up with some ideas, and then I just sort of worked from there and made it my own. So using it as a starting point for somebody like me who's writing it, it's not my profession. I can advise on what best to do for a search engine in terms of writing content, like structure and things like that. But in terms of writing, like, it's not my forte. I actually really appreciate anybody who can write. I think it's an incredible craft, like, well done. But for me, it's super useful because I'm so used to writing in such a different way, and I've been trained to write in a different way. And writing now for something completely different just hasn't come naturally. So I do find it very useful for that. I do think that it does need to go a bit further. I don't know if you saw recently there was a few tweets about it. I can't remember the company that did it, but you can talk to a historical figure like Henry Ford, and they will reply to you. And there have been some pretty
Wow.
shocking replies from the AI pretending to be Henry Ford. It says that it's an
Mm,
AI, like talk to me as if I'm Henry Ford, but I am an AI.
hmm.
And the person asked about Henry Ford's very famous anti-Semitism. And this AI was saying, "Oh, I've been misunderstood in the past, and I didn't really mean it. I obviously am very regretful." And he was a famous anti-Semitism. Like I don't think you can put words in his mouth now about being regretful. Yeah, it just doesn't make sense. And I saw exactly
Mm,
the same response from somebody who had spoken to a Nazi leader. So I think that it can be very problematic.
hmm.
So I think it has its use cases. It also doesn't have its use cases, and I think that we need to be quite careful in when to use it and when not to use it. Um, I saw a post from a content writer who I follow on LinkedIn, Rachel Nicholson. She's
Hmm.
just a fantastic writer. I'll read everything she writes because she's so good at it. And she said, "I'm actually really looking forward to ChatGPT. I'm really looking forward to all the editing jobs that I get from it." So I thought that was quite
Yeah.
funny. Um, but I mean, improvement of it is inevitable, and I think we just need to figure out how we use it in our day-to-day lives. Will it take jobs? Will it supplement jobs, or augment the jobs that you're currently working on? I think that still remains to be seen in how fast and how much it does improve. But I think it's an incredible tool, and I think we'll just have to see how Google treats the content that I think is being written quite a lot at the moment and put live. Can't remember the name of the company. I think Mark, is it Mark Williamson? I just saw you put out at
Williams
the last
Cook. Yeah.
episode.
Hmm.
Williams Cook, that's it. How did I get that wrong? Um, and he was saying how it is a matter of time, and there's this company that's put out some posts. I think it was like 75 as a test. Can't remember the name of the company, but we'll see how Google treats that content and how it makes use of AI itself. I think it's quite an interesting time because we've got this amazing new technology that can be so useful, so problematic, and I think people they how are we going to use this? Like, what are all of the applications? Because it's seemingly endless. Like, it's an incredible tool. I think we're just going to have to wait and see. In some cases, like you can only imagine a part of what people are going to come up with and how they're going to use it. But I
Hmm.
think it's a very exciting and interesting time. I think it's going to be both good and awful. So we'll see. But I'm excited.
Yeah, I like the way it's presenting what seems like clear responses, not necessarily correct, but clear responses. So, for example, using it for Excel functions, I think from what I've seen so far, it's provided very clear answers, and it's doing so almost in the way that Google would have done so within the featured snippets section. But I find for a number of queries, it understands what you're meaning better than Google. And
Mm,
I've used it as a Chrome plugin. And sometimes I actually like the Chrome plugin is on the right hand side, just below the knowledge, just above the knowledge graph. And
hmm
Google loads up the answer, and then ChatGPT, you see it load up in real time, providing you the answer, and it's very, very eye-catching. I can see how users, just non-marketing users, would almost prefer that. And because of something like that, I think Google will be forced to respond, either buying them out or incorporating their own AI within search very, very quickly. For
hmm
SEOs using it, I think it can be useful. But we have an SEO mindset, right? So we'll know what is acceptable and what's not acceptable. Say for content purposes, for example, we know if something is just gibberish, and we've learned from Panda not to have gibberish on our website. Hopefully, we've learned. And so I think
Yeah.
it should be fine with SEOs using it. The trouble I think will be with non-SEOs using it for SEO purposes. And I think that could lead to a lot of
Mm.
issues that will force Google to respond to it in order to clean up the index, or force marketers to respond to clean up their index. So I think that's where the dynamic
Mm.
between Google, marketer, and non-marketer is going to get very interesting very quickly. I mean, like this year, next year, the year after at the latest. Something is going to be a very pivotal point for search, I think.
Mm. Yeah. I think there's going to be a lot of demand for what to ask for, because
Hmm.
you can only ask for what you know you need. Or if you say, like, what do I need? Like, how do you know it's giving you the right answer? Because it's all
Yeah.
based on a context, right? There's a reason why SEOs say it depends so much. So
Yeah.
you do kind of need some level of knowledge to know what to look for. I think they say that about development a lot, like people looking on
Yeah.
Stack Overflow is life, but you need to know
Yeah.
what to search for. And I think that how do you make it easier to get to the point where you know what to search for and you know what looks good? I think that's going to be a bit tricky, and maybe
Yeah.
what is missing and leading to what you're suggesting.
And
But I mean, as you say, as an SEO, if you already know the answer, you're all right. But if you
yeah.
don't, and yeah, who knows what the right answer is? You know, if we didn't know more about Henry Ford, maybe he did really regret his anti-Semitism. I don't know. Yeah, it's yeah, it's a tricky one. Yeah, as I said before, it's a time will tell kind of thing on all of the applications, because there's just so many.
Mm,
And I think it'll work well with some, not work well with others. But I think some problems are going to be coming up pretty soon. I mean, well, we're already seeing them. Um, so
yeah.
yeah, time will
I
tell.
wonder, indeed, and I'm wondering how this will also affect the way people think of topics or keywords. Because I'm thinking if this will affect what people know to search for, will they be more interested then in um, sources, expert sources? This is, oh, man, I'm thinking out loud here, but I think this also ties in nicely into Google's update of EAT, having the expertise in there as well. Because now I'm thinking,
Yeah,
okay, are people going to be more interested in reputable sources? It seems that way because Google's updating their guidelines for it. And if that is the case, surely it's going to affect the keywords people are using to search for. In other words,
mm,
brand related searches will increase, generic related searches will decrease. And if that
that's
is the
really
case,
interesting.
yeah, because I'm thinking all of this is going to have a part to play in the next, I reckon, 2 years at the latest.
Mm. Yeah, that's a really interesting thought. Um, yeah, that is really interesting. Either that, or people searching for something still generic will expect to be provided with credentials straight off the bat, like be
Hmm.
able to see it so clearly they don't need to go to a certain source. I kind of would prefer the latter, because if you end up with people searching for the brands that they're familiar with instead of something more generic, then how are they going to find out other brands? And then if people have kind of a monopoly on information, I think that wouldn't be good. But yeah, no, that's a really interesting thought. I completely agree with you when you said um, about citations being um, more useful. I mean, I searched for something in ChatGPT. I was doing a pitch for a pet food company. And I just thought, what, I'll ask ChatGPT, like, what would you recommend for a dog with a sensitive stomach, for example? Like, which products? And it came up with some, and I was thinking, well, yeah, I can understand, like, I can understand why those were proposed. But I asked, and it was telling me, like, it's how it came up with the top three. And I think it would be extremely difficult to manipulate the answers. I think it would also take a very long time. So I think that time and the scale of the information, like the cost to make that information up to date, will probably be one of the limiting factors. And it's understanding how to work with that, because I think the cap is 2021, so it doesn't know anything until 2021. And so, what if we'd have had the pandemic in 2022? It wouldn't know about the pandemic. So I think, I think there are probably going to be a lot of different ways that it needs to work on that time limitation and how that works, whether it's from working with different companies or, I mean, obviously they're going to be charging at some point. We'll see what they come up with there. But I think that will probably be a limitation, but also just, it being stuck in its recommendations. I wonder if that's going to be a problem as well. But yeah, when I saw the pet food, I was thinking, well, how does it know to choose those? Because I mean, why is it recommending those? Like, is it coming from one particular source? And that's why I asked it. I was like, why those ones? So I think if I probably wouldn't ask it for recommendations on certain products purely because, like, why those ones? Like, is that knowledge up to date? I don't know. I wouldn't trust it with my health. So
No.
I don't know. We'll see. We'll see.
Yeah. If I'm Google, I'm just gonna say, you know what, ChatGPT, I'm just going to buy you guys out. We have the data set. We can improve what you guys have laid down as a foundation already. Sell to us, or we're just going to crush you with our version. That's what I think will most likely happen. Either they buy them out,
Yeah.
ChatGPT specifically, or they incorporate their own, especially if Bing is looking to incorporate ChatGPT into their search engine. So interesting times,
Yeah.
interesting times.
Very. Yeah.
The
I saw a stat. I think it was yesterday. And it was like percentage of Android users. I think it was in the US, it might have been worldwide. But they were saying, and yet Bing still only has 10% of market share of search engine. Yet all of these Android users, and they're still using Google, which they would, I'm assuming, have to download. And so, like, even if they have ChatGPT, are people still going to use Bing, or is Google just so firmly entrenched as being the search engine of choice? This is a mainly Western view. Is it going to change? But I think I also saw a headline about Google's own incorporation of AI, and nobody's used it yet, so I don't know if it's as good. Or I just don't think anybody's used it yet. They might have, but yeah, interesting times. We'll see if they can afford it. I don't know if
yeah.
Google will be able to buy it out.
In I think a couple of months we'll see, a lot more will be unveiled to us as a community. Now, as an
Yeah,
SEO
yeah, times are
community,
changing.
what would you say frustrates you about the industry?
What frustrates me? A few things. I think the big problems are the sexism and racism that is still pretty pervasive. There was some SEO Twitter drama. I don't know if you saw it the other day, where this guy said, I don't know why you're all getting up and kicking a fuss about this lineup that's all predominantly men. I think there were 3 women and many more men on this lineup when, we mentored all of you years ago. Like, white men started the industry 10 years ago. It was all white men. And it's like, I don't think it was. Like Judith Lewis, you've got, I don't know, there's loads, like Aleda. there were so many women in SEO 10 years ago. Like, it wasn't, I think I've been in the industry nearly 10. Like, it wasn't that long ago. Like, I think when SEO did first start out, you know, there is the stereotype of, yeah, it was white men, but there were women around, and you know, 10 years ago is pretty recent, really. Like, if you'd have said 10 years
Hmm.
ago, like 5 years ago, then it would have been like, oh yeah, no, that was the time. But it's not really anymore. Like, women have been around for a while in the industry. Like, I don't think you can say that.
A,
Like, I think that
a
that
leader's
is
been kicking ass
factually
for a
incorrect.
exactly. A leader's been smashing it for at least 15 years, at least.
Exactly. I think that there are those opinions are very pervasive. And I think actually when I did see that tweet, I was thinking every so often there's just a trigger that makes you think. I am so appreciative of Arij and Chima, who are trying to get women and people of color into the industry more, and get them represented, because I think that pervasive thinking comes from lack of representation. Like, oh yeah, it's all white men. Well, yeah, you would think
Hmm.
that if you're going on industry lineups, like, there they are. But it's not the case. They're just not being represented, and I don't
Yeah.
see any reason why any white man wouldn't want more representation, more people in the industry, more viewpoints, more knowledge, because it's such a great thing. Like, I mean, I mentioned earlier, like, I grew up on the outside of a hamlet, and then I went to Nottingham. And Nottingham University has a campus in China, and I think there's another one somewhere. But we get a lot of international students. And I was thinking, like, I'm so lucky to hear all of these different languages, because I'd never heard it. Like, you just don't hear it, like, out in the sticks, like my
Hmm.
family and the livestock. I was like, I can't believe, like, I've heard all these different languages, and I think that there are so many. There's so much to learn. Like, it should be exciting. I
Exactly.
don't know why you would put barriers up.
Yeah, it's the discoverability. Some just like to limit the discoverability, which is a shame because I think the expansion of this industry is at this point in time exactly what the industry needs. So yeah, it's a shame some people have those mindsets, but hopefully they'll
Mm,
adopt a new mindset, should we say? Now it's the
fingers
start of the
crossed.
year. Yeah, it's the start of the year. Lastly, what are you looking forward to this year?
That's a good question. I'm not one for New Year's resolutions and things like that, because I tend to just try to be constantly improving, and I don't know why I would wait for a date. If I want to do something, then I'll just do it.
Hmm.
So I'm not, like, really one for New Year's resolutions. I have seen some people say instead of a New Year's resolution, they're gonna, like, embody a phrase or a word. What was one that um, I think it was strength. Somebody had set out, um, and I don't know if that's for me either. Um, but I'm really enjoying setting up the agency. I've really enjoyed it. I've enjoyed working with Mars. I've enjoyed working alongside other people like Jazz, other agencies like Silvertip Digital who do PPC. Um, like, I'm so looking forward to forging and creating my own thing, and creating something according to the values that I hold, that I think the industry needs, like creating an individual contributor track in SEO. I think, you know, pulling it from more technical fields like development, like data science. You know, some people don't want to go into management, but classically that's the only route if they do want to progress. Like, there's enough of us now, we can have an individual contributor track. So let's incorporate that.
Hmm.
Let's have our values as being people first. You know, let's respect the people that are putting their time into working for this company. Like, I'm really enjoying it, like setting that out. And I'm looking forward to seeing what we can do. I feel like that's quite a cliche answer, but I'm really enjoying it. So that's the answer.
No, it's beautiful because it shows the mindset, and it shows having this sort of mindset within the industry. I think is shows that we're nurturing a new era of SEOs who are going to be with better values than some of the old eras, the eras of SEOs.
Yeah,
Emma,
yeah,
thank you
definitely seeing a lot of
for
improvement. Long may it last.
yeah. Thank you so much for your time. Where can people find you online?
LinkedIn and Twitter. I actually don't know what my handles are. I think it's like EMLRUSS. I think that's it. But yeah, Twitter and LinkedIn. I'll be
I'll have
posting
those.
this podcast when it comes out.
I'll have those URLs in the description. And what is the name and URL of your
Awesome.
website?
It's Oxford, digital. So Oxford dash comma dot digital. .com was taken and it cost thousands. I was like, yeah, I'm not up for that. So we went with digital.
I'll have that in the description as well. Thank you so much, Emma.
Excellent. Thank you very
Have
much.
a good day. We'll catch up again soon.
Thank you to you too.
Cheers.